All right, so today we're diving deep into Atomic Habits by James Clear. Um, we all have those goals, those big ambitions, and this book, it really breaks down how to achieve those goals, not through massive overhauls, but through these small, almost tiny changes. We're talking about building better habits, kicking those bad ones to the curb, and really just, unlocking that potential that we all have within us.
Yeah, and you know what I really appreciate about James Clear's approach is it's not about, those drastic New Year's resolutions that we always, let's be honest, often end up kind of abandoning, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
more about understanding like the systems that actually drive our everyday behavior and figuring out how to strategically change those, like little by little.
So are we ditching the vision boards then? No more New Year's resolutions?
No, not necessarily. It's more like, think of it this way. Goals, those are like your destination,
Right.
right? But the systems, those are the roadmap. That's how you actually get there. Clear's argument is that while goals give you direction, it's the systems you build that actually get you moving, that create the progress.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But how does this whole atomic concept, how does that play into this whole system?
So Clear uses atomic because it's kind of like, how atoms are these tiny building blocks that make up, well, everything.
Right.
Well, he's saying that habits, even the small ones, the things we do every single day, those are the building blocks of real lasting change, of those remarkable results.
Okay, so building on that then, do you think like one of the big reasons people struggle to stick to new habits is that they're trying to do too much at once? Like they try to make these massive changes instead of focusing on smaller, more, I don't know, manageable ones?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a big part of it. Think about it. It's so much easier to say, okay, I'm going to read for just 10 minutes today than it is to suddenly transform into someone who reads, like, a novel a day. Clear actually illustrates this point beautifully with, do you remember the story about British cycling?
Oh, yeah. The one where they went from basically being like nobody in the cycling world to dominating the Olympics and the Tour de France.
That's the one. Before Dave Brailsford came in as the performance director, nobody took British cycling seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, they'd only won like one Olympic gold medal since, get this, 1908. Yeah, but Brailsford, he had this like totally radical approach. He was like, we need to find just 1% improvements in every single thing we do, no matter how small.
I remember reading that they even tested like different massage gels to find one that could like reduce muscle soreness by like a tiny bit faster.
Exactly. And that wasn't even like the craziest thing they did. They even repainted the inside of the team truck white just so they could easily spot any dust.
Really?
Yeah, because they thought that could affect the bike's performance.
Wow.
I know, right? It sounded crazy to a lot of people, but Brailsford, he got it. He understood that if you could just find all these little advantages and you stack them on top of each other, the impact would just, like, multiply.
And it totally did. I mean, in just a few years, they were winning everything. It really shows you that even those tiny changes you make when you do them consistently, it can lead to those aha moments, those breakthroughs where it feels like almost like you didn't even have to try that hard.
Exactly. And the key is it's not about relying on motivation or willpower, which we all know can come and go. It's about designing a system, like a routine or a process, that basically makes success the most likely outcome. And one example Clear uses is the story of Brian Clark. He had this like lifelong nail-biting habit.
Oh, wow.
And instead of just trying to stop, which never really works, right?
Yeah.
He started getting regular manicures. So by keeping his nails looking good all the time, he just like completely eliminated the urge.
It's so simple, but so clever. It reminds me of that whole out of sight, out of mind thing. If you don't want to eat the cookies, you just like hide them in the back of the pantry.
Exactly. It's not about like depriving yourself. It's about strategically changing your environment to make the better choice the easier choice. And Clear, he talks about how important this concept of systems is, especially when we hit those inevitable roadblocks. In fact, he talks about his own experience with this after he had that really bad injury in high school.
Oh, right. The baseball bat accident that like almost ended his athletic career. That part of the book, it really resonated with me. Like, it's so easy to feel discouraged when things don't go the way you planned.
Oh, I totally agree. And in those moments, when you're really down, focusing on some big distant goal, it just feels overwhelming. But Clear, he learned that by shifting his focus away from that long-term goal, in his case, playing college baseball, and instead focusing on the daily systems, the rehab, the training, those smaller steps he could control, that was the key.
So it's about breaking those big, daunting goals into like bite-sized pieces, right? Focusing on the process, on the day-to-day actions rather than the finish line.
Exactly. And that's where Clear introduces this idea of the habit loop, which really helps to break it all down.
The habit loop. Okay, let's break that down because I think that's really helpful to understand. So what did you find like most useful about this whole concept?
Well, the habit loop, think of it as like the engine that drives every single habit you have. The good ones, the bad ones, all of them. And it's basically a four-stage cycle.
Hmm.
You've got your cue, your craving, the response, and then the reward.
Okay, I'm following you. So give me an example. Let's say my habit, and I'm not admitting to anything, but let's just say it's checking my phone first thing in the morning. How would that work with the habit loop?
All right, so let's break it down. Your alarm goes off, right? That's your cue.
Yeah, okay.
That triggers a craving. Maybe it's, oh, I got to see what's happening in the world, or I need to feel connected.
Right.
And that craving leads to a response. You grab your phone, you start scrolling, and the reward, that little hit of dopamine, that feeling of being in the know, right?
Yeah.
And that right there, that reinforces the entire cycle, makes you much more likely to repeat it again the next morning.
It's crazy how these tiny, almost like subconscious patterns, they really shape so much of what we do. And Clear talks about how making those unconscious habits conscious can be a powerful way to actually like change them. And he uses the example of the pointing and calling system that they use with like the Japanese train operators, which I thought was so interesting.
Oh, it's a fascinating example. Imagine you're responsible for the safety of like hundreds of passengers, right?
Right.
You're the train operator. Now, instead of just, flipping switches on autopilot, they're trained to actually point at the object and then say out loud what they're doing, like signals green.
Yeah.
And by doing that, by saying it out loud, it just brings this totally different level of awareness to something that could easily become routine.
It's like they're forcing themselves to engage, like their mind and body are both involved in this one task, so there's no room for error. So, I mean, do you think like we could apply that to other areas of our lives as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about how much we do on autopilot every single day.
Oh, so
What
much.
if we could bring that heightened awareness, that deliberate intention to all those little things we do?
Yeah, it's about being more mindful, more present, even in those like small moments throughout the day. Now, another thing from Atomic Habits that I thought was really interesting was this idea of making habits attractive. Because we all know willpower, well, it only gets us so far, right?
Oh, I know. Willpower, it's definitely not the most reliable thing. And that's why understanding how dopamine works, how our brains are wired, it's so important. Clear says that it's not even just about seeking pleasure. It's that our brains, they get wired to seek out the anticipation of that pleasure.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that the excitement, like leading up to something, that can be just as powerful, maybe even more powerful than the actual event itself.
Yes. Think about it like the anticipation of Christmas morning as a kid. Or even just like planning a vacation, right? And you know who really understands this? Businesses, especially marketers, they get this and they use it all the time to kind of like hack our habits. And Clear actually has a name for it. It's called temptation bundling.
Oh, yeah. And I've totally fallen for that myself, like a million times. It seems harmless in the moment, but then you're like, wait a minute, how did I end up here?
Right. But here's the thing. We can actually use this principle to our advantage too. So let's say you're trying to start a meditation practice, which is great, but you're struggling to find the motivation,
Hmm.
right? You can try what Clear calls temptation bundling. Like, only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while you're meditating.
Oh, that's a good idea. So you're basically tricking your brain into craving something that it used to see as like a chore or something you didn't want to do.
Exactly. You're making it more appealing. And speaking of appealing, Clear also talks about how much our environment actually shapes our habits. He argues that we're constantly being influenced by visual cues, often without even realizing it.
And he gives that great example of the fly stickers in the urinals at the airport in Amsterdam, right?
The Sheephole Airport.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's such a funny example, but it makes perfect sense.
It's such a simple thing, but it's brilliant, right?
It is.
So by putting those little fly stickers there, they were able to kind of nudge guys towards having better aim,
Yeah.
which, makes for a cleaner environment for everybody.
It totally works. And it reminds me of how like grocery stores will strategically place like the tempting items, the junk food at eye level or near the checkout
Oh, yeah.
because they know that's where we're most likely to grab something impulsively.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding how our surroundings are impacting our choices and then kind of using that to our advantage. So if you want to like eat healthier, make sure your fruits and veggies are like front and center in your fridge. You want to read more, keep a book on your bedside table. Design your environment to support your goals.
Love that. It's about reducing friction, making the good choices the easiest choices. Now, another concept that really stood out to me was the Goldilocks rule, this whole idea that we need to find that just right level of challenge to stay motivated.
It's so true, isn't it? Clear says that if something's too easy, we get bored. If it's too hard, we get overwhelmed and give up. But if you can find that sweet spot where it's challenging enough to keep you engaged but not so hard that you want to quit, that's where the magic really happens.
Yeah, that's that flow state, right? Where you're just so absorbed in what you're doing, you lose track of time. Like for me, that happens when I'm writing or when I'm like really into learning a new skill. Time just flies by.
And that's what it's all about, right? It
Uh,
should feel more like you're on this exciting adventure, this exploration, not like, ugh, I have to go do this thing now.
totally. And speaking of rewards, Clear talks about the importance of making habits satisfying because, well, our brains are wired for that instant gratification. So finding ways to reward ourselves for those small wins can be super motivating. But what about when it comes to those long-term goals, the ones where the reward, it feels so far off? How do we stay motivated when it feels like we have to wait forever to actually reap the benefits? So how do we do that? How do we stay motivated when the payoff feels like way off in the distance, especially since, like you said, our brains want that instant gratification?
Well, Clear, he has this great strategy for this. He calls it making it invisible.
Making it invisible. Okay, now you got to explain this one.
So it's all about finding ways to actually visualize your progress, even when those rewards are, way down the line. Let's say you're trying to save up for your dream vacation, right? Instead of just checking your bank account every day and maybe feeling discouraged because it's not, growing as fast as you wanted to, what if you created something visual to represent it?
Okay, so like not a vision board exactly, but more like, I don't know, a visual tracker or something showing my progress towards my savings goal.
Yeah, exactly. You could make one of those charts where, for every $100 you save, you color in a section or a progress bar on an app or something where you can see it. And that way, by making this thing that felt invisible, making it visible, you're basically giving your brain those little dopamine hits along the way. It makes
Mhm.
the journey more, real, you know?
I love that. It's like you're giving yourself these mini celebrations along the way to keep yourself going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that actually connects really well with this other thing Clear talks about a lot, which is the power of compounding. He's basically saying that even tiny changes, when you do them consistently, can create these huge results over time.
It's like that whole thing about the penny that doubles in value every day, right?
Yeah.
Like at first it doesn't seem like much, but by the end of the month, boom, we're a millionaire.
Exactly. It seems too good to be true, but it's true for money and it's true for habits too. Remember the British cycling team and those 1% improvements? Like on their own, those little changes probably didn't seem like much, but they do them consistently and over time, it totally transformed their performance.
They completely changed the game. So for our listeners out there who are like, all right, this is awesome. I want to start building some of these atomic habits. What's like the one thing you would tell them to focus on?
I would say start small and be consistent. Don't try to change everything at once because that's just overwhelming,
All
right?
right.
Instead, pick one small habit, one thing you want to change, and break it down into the tiniest, easiest steps you can manage. So let's say you want to start working out right. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Make it so easy that you can't say no.
And then just trust that those small efforts over time, they will add up to those big changes that you're looking for.
That's what it's all about. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about showing up, even on the days you don't feel like it, and just doing the work.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. I feel like we've covered so much about atomic habits, from like the habit loop to the power of compounding. It's really incredible stuff.
It's been great chatting with you about it. And for everyone listening, remember, building better habits, it really doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing. It's about embracing those small changes, those atomic changes that over time can completely transform your life for the better.
And that's what we're all about here, giving you the tools and the knowledge to unlock that potential. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to check out our website for more episodes where we explore all sorts of interesting stuff, always with the goal of helping you learn something new.
Until next time, keep those atomic habits going. And remember, even the smallest changes can create extraordinary results.